Now, in order to understand the dynamic of the Earth as a continent, you need to understand that the Earth is made up of some, or basically, you need to understand the fact that the lithosphere itself that makes up the Earth is fragmented. The lithosphere is fragmented into some 20 tectonic plates. And those 20 tectonic plates consist of some dozen large rigid plates, of which the Pacific plate is the largest of all. However, plates are not identical with continents because you can find more than one continent fitting within the same plate or a plate extending over one continent. Now, such plates moves continuously and they move at a rate of some 1 to 15 centimeter per year. Now, 15 centimeter per year might seem small, but imagine 15 centimeter per year over a period of 500 million years. That means significant changes would have happened. So that's why this motion might appear to be slow on a human time scale, yet it's extremely rapid on a geological time scale. And such plates get to interact along their boundaries. Later on, we'll talk more in terms of how they interact and the likes. So now there are three types of plate boundaries. There is what is called a divergent plate boundary, which involve plates drifting apart and a new lithosphere is created. So plate area increases. They are also called constructive plate boundaries. Then you have convergent plate boundaries where plates are converging, coming together. So it's plates coming together and one is recycled into the mantle. As a result, plate area is decreased. Then on the other hand, you have what we call transform faults. Plates slide horizontally past each other. Such plates does not create or does not increase the plate area, nor does it decrease it. So the plate area remain constant. So now diverging involve, for example, the spreading of plate, constructive, I have already talked about, or creating ridges. And of course, it involves activities such as volcanic eruption. So when these plates spread, move away from each other, it would create an oceanic ringe, and this opening up would contribute to volcanic eruption. On the other hand, you have convergent plate boundaries, for example, which involve subduction motion. They are destructive in nature because when the two plates move, for example, you have a continental plate and an oceanic plate, the oceanic lithosphere would be destroyed. They largely form trenches, unlike the diverging plate boundary, which create ridges or lift. For example, the East Africa Lift Valley, whereby part of the African continent, including countries such as Ethiopia, Kenya, and the like, are breaking away from Africa. Then you have the transform plate boundary, which largely involve lateral sliding, right? Lateral sliding in different directions or in the same direction but at different speed. So these are considered to be conservative because no lithosphere is created or destroyed. This does not result in major topographical effect, but it can trigger things like earthquake. So now, what we have here is a typical example of a divergent plate boundary. You have two plates moving away from each other. What happens? You have, for example, Rift Valley being created, such as the East Africa Rift Valley, because these two plates are moving away from each other. And as a result, you will also have, for example, new ocean basin being created. When these two plates move away from each other, it results in, for example, ocean floor spreading. So new uh, ocean would be created. For example, what has happened between Africa and South America. When these two plates move away from each other, what happened is that the ocean started, for example, spreading and then take over. So that is a diverging plate boundary. Again, just to give an example, this is Iceland. I already talked about Iceland being located along this oceanic ridge. Now, what you see here is that if you go to Iceland, you have two plates moving away from each other. You have the North American plates moving in this direction. You have the Eurasian plate moving in this direction. This create this Rift Valley, right? So eventually, these two would continue moving away from each other. So basically, you have two plates that are breaking away from each other, creating this kind of landform. Uh, in this picture, it's much more pronounced. You see, this is a road that is built within that valley which has been created when these two uh, plates started moving away from each other. And again, it's much more pronounced here. So these are real stuffs that are taking place. And this is what you get to see when you in there. I have been there myself. Because I went for studies in Iceland. This is something that I have seen myself. This is a place I have been to myself. So eventually, this is what is taking place. You have Iceland as a country located uh, between along the boundary of two uh, uh, plates. You have the North American plate, you have the Eurasian plate. So now you have a diverging taking place such that one part of Iceland is going in this direction, the other part of Iceland is going in the other direction. So eventually that means the country is slowly but surely becoming bigger because of that spreading, right? However, that also means this is a country that is dominated by a lot of seismic activities. There are earthquake activities taking place. There are volcanic activities taking place. A typical example is what you see in this picture. So if you go to Iceland, all the way you land at an airport called Keflavik, all the way along the road from Keflavik going to their capital city called Reykjavik, you are confronted with a landscape littered with lava. This is lava. This was not deposited by humans. So this basically means this is lava which was created after an eruption from a mountain such as this one. So this lava was thrown in the air and eventually it got deposited here, right? Eventually it got deposited here. So now that means if it has happened once, it will happen again. So keep basically watch out what might happen to you if you go for holiday in Iceland, if you like. On the other hand, convergent plate boundaries, we said, are two plates that are moving toward each other. Now, we have two types of plates. We have a continental, or we have two types of crust, rather. We have a continental crust and we have an oceanic crust. If these two are moving toward each other, what would happen is that if they are both continental, they are of the same density, and as a result, they would basically push up and form mountains, right? But when you have an oceanic and a continental crust, for example, meeting each other, the oceanic crust is much more denser in terms of density, so it will be forced down, it will get recycled in the earth mantle, and as a result, the area of that crust would have been reduced. But if you have, for example, two continental crusts that are moving together, that is what brings you the likes of the Himalaya mountains. The Himalaya mountains, whereby plates of the same density are moving together, and none of the two can be forced down to sink. So as a result, the landscape would continue, basically start building up all these mountains. And of course, it can also trigger volcanic activities. In addition to that, you have transform plate boundaries. We have already talked about them here. We said it's basically plates that are slide passing each other, right? They are not constructive and neither are they destructive. So, but what they cause is, for example, the likes of San Andreas Fault in California, where the Pacific plate slide past the North American plate, uh, uh, and as a result, it creates things like earthquake in California and the likes. Now, those things are not to be estimated. Don't feel just because you are in Namibia, you are more safe. We also have uh, tectonic activities taking place within our neighborhood. If you check this digital elevation model, you'll be able to realize that we have things like the Rinyanti fault, we have several faults in Zimbabwe, in Botswana rather. So there are also some seismic activities taking place, and just a few years back, we actually had a volcanic activity taking place in Botswana for that matter. I'm sure you heard about it a while ago. So no place will be spared, if you like.